today I'm going to be showing you how to create a 3D model in Google Blocks and then export it for printing. So this is the Google Block software. It's free if anybody has an HTC Vive or an Oculus Rift. And we're going to create it using these two controllers right here. The first panel on my left-hand side has all my tools and the undo and redo buttons. And in my right hand, I have my drawing pad. Now this allows me to change the size of objects and also select different objects on the different tools. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to create a 3D model of a snowman. So we're going to select the sphere and we're going to draw 3 spheres. Now I'm simply using the plus and minus icons on this controller to change the size as I go through and create our basic snowman shape. So there he is. Now what I want to do is add some details to him. So the first thing we need to do, we want to add his eyes. We'll make him a couple eyes made out of coal. A couple little buttons as well. That looks pretty good. And we'll change shapes and we'll actually give him a hat. There we go. So all I'm doing to get access to these different shapes is I've currently got these shapes selected, and I'm simply going left or right on the controller to access the different shapes, and then using the plus and minus buttons. So we're going to give him a nose right now. I'm going to rotate my hand around, and you'll see the color palette on the back side. And we're going to give him a little carrot nose. The modify tool here is going to allow us to grab and drag that out to wherever we want. To rotate and to view them from different angles, I'm going to squeeze the 4 buttons that are on the sides of the remote together. This is what allows me to zoom in by bringing my arms further or closer together, zooming in and zooming out, and also to rotate. I'm simply squeezing those buttons and twisting the remotes around each other to rotate and to zoom. Last thing we need on our snowman, I think, are some arms. So I'm going to use a stroke, and I'm simply going to use a circular shape. And I'm going to add arms coming out of the side. Now, if we're going to 3D print this, we want to make sure that the pieces are merged perfectly, which means I'm actually going to start inside of the shape and work my way out. When the computer slices this, it'll see those as one solid piece. I'm going to use the grab tool just to kind of twist or rotate if anything's a little crooked. But that looks pretty good. So very simple shape, nice little snowman. Now we're going to save him. And we're going to save it locally to this computer. He's now saved on our desktop in the Documents folder. So now what we need to do is open up the slicing software and set him up in there. So we can exit out of this program. Alright, so here on the desktop, we're going to open up FlashPrint. So for any of you who have used a FlashForge 3D printer before, this is the slicing software you've probably used. What we need to do now is we need to go and find our model. So we're going to go to Load, and we're going to go to the Documents folder. We're going to go to Blocks. We're going to look in the Models folder, and we're going to find our file. Now it is important to pay attention to what time you've done this because it creates an auto-generated name and it can be difficult to find if you've created multiple models. So we're going to open that up and we're going to find the .obj file. That is an object file that the FlashForge FlashPrint software can recognize. So we're going to open this up. We're going to place it on the platform. And if you get an error asking if there's errors in your model, you can just completely repair the model. Alright. Now, it's hard to see, but this tiny little red dot in the center is actually our model. So there he is. There's our little snowman. He's oriented in the wrong direction, and he's very tiny. So what we're going to need to do is we're going to rotate him the right direction. So we're going to click on Rotate and select our snowman. And we're going to rotate him 90 degrees on the x-axis. So there he is. Now he's sitting up the right way, but he's kind of through the bottom of the build plate. So what we're going to do is go move, and we're going to bring him onto the platform. So now he's right where we want him, but we do still need to scale him up. Now the easiest way to do this is to simply click on him, click on scale, and then drag with your mouse cursor, because depending on what program you use, the scaling is different. So if you're pulling in an object from Tinkercad or something you've created in SketchUp or another program, the scaling may be set differently in those programs. So you can scale him up using your mouse cursor. Now the printer I'm using is a FlashForge Guider 2, which has a much larger bed than the FlashForge Finders most people have in their buildings. So I'm just going to pay attention as I scale him to the size that shows up on the side. We're going to make him 10 centimeters high, or about 100 millimeters. So there we go. Our snowman is set to in the right position to print. If you want to do any fine adjustments right here, you can angle him just a little bit more so he's a little bit straighter. That looks pretty good. Now the next step we need to do is a little bit different, because most of the time you want your print to start right directly on the deck. The problem is there's not a lot of printing surface right now, and he's actually poked his way through the bottom of it. We actually need to bring him down a little bit more. This is actually going to allow him to print and stick to the deck. If not, it will break off. So I'm actually going to bring the snowman down just a few millimeters, but that's all it's going to take. Now this faint blue line around here shows where he's going to be printing. So he is actually going to adhere to the deck. Just like that. So as he prints, it'll start with this bottom layer, and we're actually going to preview that in just a moment. Now the next step is to add supports. While his buttons and the 3 main snowballs and his hat should print just fine, the nose probably will not print properly. So we're going to go to supports, and we're going to generate some auto supports. Now notice those are going up to support his eyes and his nose. And that is to make sure that everything prints the way it should. That looks like it should work just fine. Now we're going to check our model. So we're not going to save these files yet, but what we're going to do is actually going to test to see how the print is going to work. So I'm going to click on print. I'm going to go and select PLA, which is the plastic we're going to be using. I'm going to leave all the other options to their defaults, which should be fine. I'm going to hit OK. We are going to say yes to this because we actually want it to start slicing at the level that we've kind of decided on. We don't need a rafter or brim. It should adhere to the deck just fine. And we're going to save our model. We'll just save that onto the desktop for now. Now here's where we're actually going to check to see whether he's going to print properly. We're going to go over to the layer slider, and we're going to go all the way down to the bottom. This is going to show layer by layer how well he's going to print. So our first layer, you can see the support structure being generated, and then as we go up, we're going to be able to check layer by layer to see if there's any overhangs or anything that would not print properly. So I always tell people before they print, you should always preview your print just to make sure there's nothing that'll overhang or nothing hanging in midair. And that looks just fine. So especially this section right here with all the buttons and the supports and his nose, we can actually see quite well right here that his nose is going to be supported as it prints up the whole entire way. So that model is ready to go. We now simply connect to our printer and hit print or export this file to a thumb drive, and we are all set. So I hope this little tutorial gave you a little bit of an intro of how to design something very quickly in Google Blocks and then to export it for 3D printing.